Tonight, in cities across the country, members of South Asian communities are under siege.
They ask you $2 million, like cash money.
Threats of extortion, even gunshots fired at homes. The calls tonight for an international probe. Quebec says the number of asylum seekers has it close to the breaking point.
A lot of claimants are also going to those shelters because it's that or either it's the streets.
Rosie and the ad issue panel on the political stakes. And the wave of gambling ads and promos on sports broadcasts.
Do you think there should be limits?
Right there.
Oh, did you see one?
Yeah.
See? Right there.
Want to bet how many we found per minute?
This is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. There are calls tonight for federal action to help solve a disturbing trend in at least 3 provinces. Acts of violence and extortion targeting members of South Asian business communities. Police and political officials in Ontario, Alberta, and BC say they're all investigating similar crimes, drive-by shootings, homes under construction lit on fire, and schemes demanding money. So it's unclear if there are direct connections among them, but Edmonton's police service is now speaking out. Philip Lishanok on why it believes those local crimes are being directed from overseas.
Edmonton police suspect this fire 10 days ago was one of more than a dozen recent arsons set with a purpose: extortion. Those targeted members of the city's South Asian business community.
Typically, our victims receive a WhatsApp communication, and then from there, there's a request that comes along with that for some compensation.
So far, investigators say they've connected 27 crimes, including this drive-by shooting, to an extortion ring operating in Edmonton but controlled overseas.
It's our belief that these crimes are being orchestrated from India.
But Edmonton isn't alone. Similar incidents are the focus for police in other Canadian cities. On Boxing Day in Surrey, BC, the home of the son of a prominent community member was shot at.
They're thinking, might be. They want to get, to scare us and the community.
Satish Kumar arranged for RCMP to meet with local South Asian business owners. He says some have received demands for protection money.
And they ask you $2 million, cash money. First thing, who have cash money over here, $2 million?
Then there's a situation in Peel region outside Toronto. Police there arrested a BC man after shots were fired at a Brampton business. Since November, they say, more than 20 extortion attempts have targeted the South Asian business community there.
Those that are being victimized are either complying to the threats, which we're encouraging them not to do, but to come to us investigatively, because we are working at a national level.
While the police chief ordered a special task force, Brampton's mayor wants an international effort.
It would require the full cooperation of law enforcement agencies in India.
Brown has support from his counterpart in Surrey, both demanding action from the federal government. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
Calgary police are speaking out 2 days after a woman was killed by her estranged husband, saying both it and the province need to look harder at intimate partner violence. Aaron Collins starts his story at the scene, a bloody and disturbing example of an all-too-common crime.
These images difficult to see. The scene of a deadly attack on a woman by her estranged husband. Harder still for other victims of domestic violence.
Sometimes I think that could have been me.
Her abusive partner was also charged. Both men had no contact orders placed on them, and both were released almost immediately.
It's frustrating because even when I heard about this story in my head, I thought to myself, I bet you there was a no contact order. Or was he out on conditions for something else? And sure enough, in this situation, they are.
Investigators confirmed the man who killed his wife this week was out on bail. Warrants for his arrest were issued the morning of the attack. He was found dead just blocks from the scene. The Calgary police have now asked the provincial body that reviews family violence deaths to look into the killing.
I think we owe a further duty to try to dig deeper, notwithstanding the obvious, to try to figure out the why.
Those that help victims navigate the justice system agree.
I think a critical look when tragedies like this happen are necessary. And I think it's how we can move forward together.
We have 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units.
Shelters for victims of domestic abuse reveal a growing problem. Calls for help on the rise. Use of shelters in the province up nearly 20%.
No one living here now, but is it available?
It's not available. This is spoken for, and we should have a family moving in any day.
A problem not limited to Alberta.
A woman dies by their intimate partner every 6 days in Canada. So the issue is dire.
Ottawa is trying to address the problem. A new federal law requires judges to consider domestic violence in cases before them. An attempt to criminalize coercive behavior by partners is being debated.
It is a systemic problem. It's been recognized as an epidemic, and we can't just keep calling these cases tragedies and then fail to be dealing with the underlying problems.
But progress is slow, and answers aren't likely before another Canadian dies at the hands of their partner. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
In Nova Scotia, a 22-year-old man has been charged in connection with the largest ever wildfire in the province's history. This comes just days after a Quebec man pleaded guilty to starting a series of fires in that province last spring. The Nova Scotia man isn't facing criminal charges for the fire that burned more than 23,000 hectares, but he could be fined up to $50,000 and/or receive 6 months in jail. The wildfire displaced thousands of people and destroyed dozens of homes. One person is confirmed dead following that major winter storm on BC's south coast. More snow is expected in the Fraser Valley tonight. But first, Lindsay Duncombe shows us how Vancouver managed today.
The warning signs couldn't keep these teenagers away from the ice in Stanley Park. In case they need to be rescued, their mom packed a rope.
What made you decide to say, okay, you know what, boys, go out there, be careful, play hockey?
Because they're annoying. No, they were very persistent. So, yeah, and look at them. They're having a great time.
There's a young kid going out there.
Also watching with concern, the 2 men seeking shelter in this tent. Safer, they say, than the emergency warming centers.
Just for, 5 or 6 hours of sleep? In with a bunch of idiots.
If you're lucky, you get 2 hours of time.
They're stealing stuff.
Somebody's
and talking
screaming.
to themselves. And, oh, jeez. I'd rather sleep in the snow.
The last time Vancouver got this much snow was 1996. Victoria is blanketed too. With the joy comes frustration. This man's seaplane to the island cancelled.
It's beautiful, but traveling's complicated.
I must have waited a good 25 minutes for the bus, which is unheard of.
But there was also tragedy. In Abbotsford, a pedestrian was killed by a privately operated pickup truck plowing snow. And with freezing rain in the forecast, the danger on the roads is far from over.
It causes extremely slippery surfaces and can be really dangerous for travel.
Still, some Vancouver parents wonder if this second snow day was really necessary.
Taking reference from other cities across Canada, like the city could have done a lot more in terms of plowing.
If other Canadians want to mock how a big dump of snow can shut down the city, this hockey mom says, let them.
Well, what they should know is that there will be no trace of any of this by Sunday. Ha ha. And the crocuses will be coming in about, 4 weeks.
Beauty of a different kind once all this melts away. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Winter weather is also hammering the opposite end of the country with snow squall watches and warnings for Newfoundland tonight. The western parts of the island could see as much as 50 centimeters. On top of that, strong winds may create blizzard conditions that could last into Friday. Turning to Quebec now, where Premier François Legault has appealed directly to the Prime Minister in writing, asking to slow the influx of asylum seekers, saying Quebec's resources are near the breaking point. Kate McKenna now on Legault and his letter.
Roxham Road, an internationally known migrant crossing, was closed last year. But migrants keep coming. Now, Quebec's premier says by plane. In a letter to the Prime Minister, François Legault says last year Quebec received more than 60,000 asylum seekers. Unfortunately, we are close to the breaking point because of the excessive number of asylum seekers arriving in Quebec month after month. The situation has become unbearable, he wrote. Quebec's immigration minister says the influx of children has meant the need for more than 1,000 additional classes. This amid an existing teacher shortage. And everyone agrees there's not enough housing.
Yes, right now, a lot of claimants are also going to those shelters because it's that or either it's the street.
Quebec wants federal money to cover the added costs and wants some newcomers to settle in other provinces. And with more migrants coming from Mexico, Legault wants Canada to tighten visa requirements for Mexican nationals. The Prime Minister made no promises.
We have been working closely with Quebec over the past years, as we have with different parts of the country that have experienced a greater than expected influx of asylum seekers. We've transferred millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. We've worked with them on various programs, and we will continue to.
I understand the breaking point.
Toronto has a similar problem, and a mayor threatening to hike taxes even higher. Olivia Chow says the city needs Ottawa to kick in an extra $250 million.
We are doing our best. We're opening up warming centers. So in freezing cold weather, no one is left out in the street.
As for Quebec, the federal government has already allocated hundreds of millions of dollars. But some experts warn the number of asylum seekers is only likely to grow, saying that an increase in global conflict means more people are on the move. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Rosie and the At Issue panel will take a deeper dive on all of this. That is coming up in about 20 minutes. There is celebration in Nunavut tonight, a deal to grant sovereignty over its own land and resources. A process begun decades ago, completed today, opening up hopes for a new future. The Prime Minister was there, and so was Juanita Taylor.
Inuit culture at its best, to welcome what is about to come for Nunavut and to the place they call home.
Our land, our resources in the hands of our people.
The culmination of decades of work, the Nunavut Lands and Resources Devolution Agreement gives the territory full control over its lands and waters, and the final say in decision-making over resource development projects.
This is actually the day that started the whole process.
This former land claims negotiator says for over 100 years, decisions on how Inuit lives would be governed have been made in Ottawa. Over the years, housing, education, and health care have been transferred back to Nunavut. Now, lands and resources seal the deal.
To me, this whole process is certainly part of a reconciliation, as I can say it.
This agreement gives Nunavut full control over 2 million square kilometers of lands and waters. It will also transfer about 100 jobs from the federal government to the territorial government. The land claim organization, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, is also a signatory.
It's really important that we start ramping up over the transitional period of 3 years on how many Inuit can be trained and get the formal education required so that they can take on those jobs.
At the Nunavut Arctic College, this student is looking forward to his future.
That was always the goal, is for Nunavut to be in charge of itself. And I think we're going through the steps right now, and I think it's amazing.
So Juanita, when will people in Nunavut, some of whom are celebrating behind you now, start seeing the benefits from the agreement?
Well, not anytime soon, Adrian. The signing comes with funding for a 3-year implementation plan, but it does include $15 million in job training to take on the new and added responsibilities. Adrian?
All right, Juanita Taylor at a celebration in Iqaluit. Thank you. The United States Justice Department has released a scathing review into how law enforcement responded to one of the worst school shootings in U.S. history. The report describes a, quote, series of major failures.
Failures in leadership, in tactics, in communications, in training, and in preparedness.
In May of 2022, 19 children and 2 teachers were killed in Uvalde, Texas, when a gunman armed with an assault rifle opened fire inside their school. Today's report details how police took more than an hour to confront the gunman as he continued his rampage. Police eventually shot and killed him, but victims' families say they are still looking for justice.
Do right by the victims and survivors of Robb Elementary. Terminations, criminal prosecutions. And our state and federal government enact sensible gun laws.
So far, Texas prosecutors have not laid criminal charges related to the police response. Overseas now, where after an exchange of airstrikes, many are watching the Iran-Pakistan border tonight. Sasha Petrusek takes us through that back and forth and what it could mean for the region.
A village in rubble in eastern Iran, the work of missiles fired by Pakistan.
Pakistan undertook a series of highly coordinated and specifically targeted precision military strikes against terrorist hideouts.
Just on the other side of the border, a similar scene. Pakistani houses destroyed by Iranian missiles 2 days earlier. Both countries saying they're not targeting each other, but their own militants hiding next door. Still, Washington worries these sparks could further ignite a volatile region.
Certainly, there's no need for escalation, and we would urge restraint on all sides in this case.
With its proxies like the Houthis under attack and Tehran feeling the need to show its strength, Iran has been lashing out this week, not only firing into Pakistan and facing quick retaliation, but also targeting what it calls Israeli spies in Iraq and Islamic State militants in Syria.
Given how these strikes have played out, it's going to be difficult to come back from the brink in the immediate term.
Still, there are signs Iran and Pakistan are trying to de-escalate. Iran's foreign minister insists Pakistan is his country's friend and brother, with Pakistan issuing similar declarations. Turkey's foreign minister saying he was in touch with both countries and neither wants the confrontation to spread. But with huge posters now in Tehran warning Israel and other enemies to prepare their coffins, it's not clear just how conciliatory Iran is ready to be. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Toronto.
Sports betting ads are appearing to pop up everywhere.
Proline, not just another sports book.
CBC Marketplace took an actual count, and you might find the number startling.
That's crazy. That's kind of crazy.
Some Canadians are still suffering from long COVID.
It's like aging 50 years.
Why they're finding it harder to get care. And a surprise flight announcement that's worthy of applause.
But now is cancer-free and on his way to his honeymoon in Jamaica.
We're back in 2. Former Canadian world champion pole vaulter Shawn Barber has died. His agent confirmed he passed away today at his home in Texas. The cause of death was not specified, but Barber was dealing with an ongoing illness. Canada's current record holder in the men's pole vault, he won gold at the 2015 World Championships and competed at the 2016 Olympics in Rio. Shawn Barber was just 29. Clinics across this country specializing in long COVID are losing their funding. Patients are those who struggle with symptoms lasting 3 months or more. But for many, it's been life-altering. Christine Birak spoke with some who are worried they'll be abandoned.
Studies show 50 to 75% of long COVID patients recover, and vaccines help. But the latest StatsCan data reveal some bad news.
I live in Quebec City,
Matlin, British Columbia,
Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
As of last June, over 2 million Canadians reported they were still experiencing long COVID symptoms. And yet, without warning, provincial funding for long COVID clinics is drying up.
I've had memory loss.
We asked patients across the country what they're dealing with.
I have trouble breathing.
I suffer from nausea daily. It ripped my gallbladder.
My life has been in complete chaos.
Doctors treating long COVID patients say too many are being ignored.
Their experiences aren't being validated with long COVID and are often told that this is all just in your head.
It's like aging 50 years in the span of a few weeks.
Marchell asked us not to use his last name. A COVID infection 2 years ago left him with lung damage, fatigue, and brain fog. He recently received a letter saying a local post-COVID rehab program is closing effective immediately,
We regret to inform you.
directing him to the World Health Organization and other websites.
I was looking for someone to figure this out with instead of trying to figure it out myself.
When it comes to long COVID, I suffered from it myself for 18 months.
Manali Mukherjee studies long COVID, searching for differences in patients who ended up with the condition and those who recovered. A newly published study and commentary found abnormalities in patients with long COVID, including immune damage or changes in blood protein levels linked to prolonged inflammation. Mukherjee says those findings, along with others, could ultimately lead to tests and treatments for the condition. Her message to patients?
Have faith. The medical community is working on it. The scientific community is working on it.
Patients desperately want hope, but many worry as memories of the pandemic fade, they will be forgotten. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Sporting events are being inundated with gambling ads.
Not just another sports book.
But are there now too many?
That is a bit of a shocking stat.
CBC Marketplace investigates. But first, Rosie's here with that issue. Hey, Rosie.
Hey, Adrian. Tonight we're going to talk about Canada's struggle with immigration. Multiple levels of government are now warning about the number of asylum seekers. Is there more the federal government can be doing to help ease the burden? Chantal, Althea, Andrew, and Jason Markisoff join me to talk about that and more.
Just landed. I know you see the plane. Just touched down. Super excited. Can't wait to meet all you guys. And I'm just super excited, man. Let's get it. Go Pacers.
That is Pascal Siakam greeting a new fan base, arriving in Indianapolis after his trade from the Raptors. Masai Ujiri reflected on winning a championship with Siakam.
Yeah, 2 African guys that won a championship. I share that with them. And I say to you guys that that guy's success is my success, no matter where he is.
Drafted in 2016, Siakam is a free agent at the end of the season. Now stay right there, sports fans. Time to talk about those ads, logos, and promos for online gambling at the game and during the commercials. Asha Tomlinson and CBC's Marketplace conducted a first-of-its-kind test. Just how many ads are there anyway?
Think you've got good picks.
Gambling ads are everywhere, from the commercials
Proline, not just another sports book.
to these big, bold logos, to the sponsored segments breaking down your odds. So we collaborated with a team out of the UK to get some hard numbers. They analyzed 2 NBA and 5 NHL games.
It was just clear as we were watching those 7 games how bombarded we were by the sheer prevalence of gambling, brand logos and other references.
Researchers found 3,537 gambling messages in all. That works out to nearly 3 a minute.
That's crazy. That's kind of crazy still. I don't think we need so much gambling ads.
Yeah, but why does that concern you? What is shocking about it?
A lot of kids watch those games, you know? That is a bit of a shocking stat.
Do you think there should be limits? Oh, did you see one?
Yeah.
See? Right there.
Experts say this is potentially harmful for young people and problem gamblers.
In our second quarter, we've had more calls than the entire last year. It's been online gambling, often younger men, sports betting online.
Paul Burns represents the industry and says advertising is highly regulated.
So how do you respond to people who say, this is too much, it's excessive?
Some people think it is and some people don't think it is. I think that there's always more we can do, and we will continue to do that, and we are.
We reached out to both the NBA and NHL, no official comment. As for the broadcasters, CBC says that Sportsnet controls the advertising. Sportsnet tells us they want viewers to enjoy betting responsibly, and they do follow regulations. Same for TSN. They add that responsible gaming is a key element of their approach. And one stakeholder says that our findings appear to be overstated and that to count each logo is not the right way to measure overexposure. Asha Tomlinson, CBC News, Toronto.
You can check out the full results of Marketplace's investigation tomorrow. That's at 8 p.m. on CBC Gem and CBC Television, 8:30 in Newfoundland. Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Rosie's here with At Issue.
At issue this week, growing concerns over the rise in asylum seekers, multiple levels of government sounding the alarm.
We are doing what we can under this financial strain. But do we want to close the doors to refugees? No.
Now, François Legault says the situation in Quebec is near a breaking point. All of it as Ottawa looks at reducing the number of international students. So what's to be done about the level of asylum seekers entering Canada? Can Ottawa do anything to ease the burden of non-permanent residents on provinces and municipalities? I'm Rosemary Barton. Let's bring in our panelists to break it down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj, and Jason Markusoff joins us from Calgary tonight. Good to see you all. Chantal, Ottawa has obviously pointed to some of the things that they've done in Quebec in particular. In Quebec, they closed Roxham Road, and in Toronto, they've also offered additional funding. What did you make of Legault's letter and what's going on here?
Okay, a number of things. Legault's complaints are not new, but they do refer to a situation that has been becoming increasingly difficult to manage between Toronto and Montreal, and the reasons for that are Pearson Airport and Trudeau Airport. The Quebec and Ontario have been receiving the bulk of asylum seekers. The numbers have been going up at a time when there is a housing crisis in both Toronto and Montreal, and most of the people who do land and seek asylum are bound to stay in Montreal and Toronto. Mm-hmm. And you see both Legault using the hook of this debate that has now expanded beyond Quebec's borders to say, gee, we have an issue, and the solution is not international students, to tell you the truth. It's social services, it's schools. Go down the list. There is no way that the City of Montreal has the capacity to offer help to. It's not even a money issue at this point. It's also a housing issue. The same is true in Toronto. I think both Legault and Chow are playing the same political game, i.e. they are hitting the Liberals where it hurts electorally. Yeah. Montreal and Toronto are also the last pillars of the Liberal coalition that brought Justin Trudeau to power. But I also note that there has been a general shift in the debate on immigration this week. Pierre Poilievre was in Quebec, and he was saying, I'm going to limit immigration numbers to match our capacity to build housing. That is new. That's the Conservatives stepping out of a consensus and taking a risk. It's no surprise that happened in Quebec, because this is the province where immigration has been debated most over the past few years.
And to be clear, though, that the strain that we're talking about is non-permanent residents, international students, asylum seekers, and others. What do you think about this debate that we're having around immigration at this time, Andrew, and where it's going?
Well, it's metastasizing, and Chantal emphasized, at least in the first part of her remarks, the legitimate issue that's at stake here, and there are legitimate issues. Maybe I'll put a little bit more emphasis on the politics of this. Yes. You've got a government that's at 25% in the polls. You've got an issue that's achieved kind of escape velocity, and for politicians at other levels of government and other jurisdictions, it's a good time to be piling on. You can raise your complaint and have the government's attention in a hurry in a way you might not have if they were riding higher in the polls and if the issue had not achieved quite the same salience. And yes, a big part of it, not all of it, but a big part of it is money. It may be money for good purposes, but it's money. Sure. So yeah, it's a good time to pile on the federal government right now.
Althea?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week, but I think the debate, the consensus around immigration is fraying, and it is around, at least publicly, it is around the capacity issue that Chantal was talking about in terms of not having, classes, teachers, doctors, emergency room capacity in hospitals. Do we have the capacity to welcome as many people as are coming in our country with open arms in the way that we would like to welcome them? And so it has changed from being kind of like an ethnic or a concern about certain types of people coming to the country as opposed to our ability to welcome them, which I think is a much more comfortable position for a lot of Canadians. Pierre Poilievre did not say what he said in Quebec for the first time this week. He actually made those comments before Christmas, but I think they kind of got lost because it was the holidays. But I feel like it is an argument that is gaining a lot of strength. And it's not just around asylum seekers, which a lot of people do fairly or unfairly blame the federal government because it's been so publicized and so associated with the Trudeau government. In the same way that, you could point the blame at how they've expanded temporary foreign workers in this country. I mean, Quebec is a bit different because they have more control over that. International students. There's a lot of things that you could say that the federal government could have taken the steps on the Mexican visas, for example. In 2016, they decided to get rid of the Mexican visas. Maybe it's time to put them back. But when you have stories that say things like, we're welcoming all these international students who actually a significant chunk of them are not actually even going to school. They're basically using it as a loophole to get permanent residency in this country and working while they are here. That's not what the program is intended to be. That is the federal government's fault at the end of the day. And people are right to blame the government. And again, it speaks to that issue that we've been talking about for like a year, which is, can the federal Liberals actually govern properly? And they seem to have very little interest in governing. And this is one of those issues that if they don't get this right, I think it could really hurt them and hurt that consensus in Canada.
Jason.
And I mean, it's remarkable how it's at every level of immigration where things are bursting or expanding beyond where they have before. Not just the the program immigration, family reunification, and skilled worker programs. It is the temporary workers, which we've been talking about. It's the international students, which we've been talking about. It's the asylum seekers. And the challenge with the asylum seeker situation is there's some degree of control, direct control Canada can have over the number of people they let in as temporary foreign workers, or as international students, or even program refugees. When somebody gets to the airport or gets to another port and declares asylum in the country, whether on a student visa or traveler visa, you can't say no. This is requirement. Yes, they closed down Roxham Road, but even so, this was by November, it was already a record year for asylum seekers. In fact, it was higher than it was in 2018 and 2019 combined when the whole Roxham Road debate was really exploding. So there's nothing that the government can do to limit that. All they have to do is, all they can do is now have this debate with the jurisdictions that are required to house them and host them on this. And regarding Poilievre, I would note that Poilievre is responding. He's not leading this debate. He's responding to a great change in public opinion on this issue, that people are concerned about what this means for Canada's economic capacity.
Yeah, and I would also say about his position, I'm not really sure what it means other than saying we're going to attach a housing build to how many people we let in. It's a chicken and the egg thing. I'm not sure he's explained exactly how that would work. Chantal?
Yeah.
But it is a way to rationalize a promise to lower the number of immigrants that come to this country in the name of something other than they're stealing our jobs or they're not the people we want. I don't totally agree with the notion that the federal government is powerless to cut down on asylum seekers. I don't think Stephen Harper imposed visas on Mexicans who wanted to come to Canada because he doesn't like Mexico. There was an issue there. And that is something the federal government is allowed and can do and is apparently under pressure from the Biden administration to do.
I was remembering an interview I did about a year ago with Secretary Mayorkas, where he was asking Canada to do this very thing a year ago. Last word to you on this, Andrew.
Just a couple of things. First of all, Roxham Road was closed. Apparently that didn't solve the problem, as we were assured it would. Secondly, look, the problems in housing and productivity long predate the surge in population growth we've had in the last couple of years. Now, maybe it's exacerbated, but if all we do is we cut back on immigration and we don't fix the problems in housing policy and in investment policy, we won't have solved any problems at all. It'll just be a Band-Aid solution that doesn't fix anything.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. When we come back, though, we're going to take a look at the political battle over Alberta's power grid. A very cold winter, as Jason can attest, forcing Albertans to limit their electricity use, with the province placing the blame on green energy. What's to be made of Alberta's power grid woes? That's next. Alberta's battle with Ottawa over energy got real this week after a brutal cold snap tested the province's own electric grid. Albertans were asked to turn off the lights. The province used it as a chance to criticize the federal government's focus on renewables and its promise of a net zero grid by 2035.
It wasn't ideological that the sun goes down at 4:55 before the peak. It wasn't ideological that the wind wasn't blowing or it was minus 30 and they couldn't turn. It was just a reality of a northern climate. So we need natural gas.
So what's to be made of Alberta's power grid woes? Can cold weather change public opinion? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, Althea, and Jason. Jason, you start us off because you had to suffer in the dark over the weekend, or limited light. Do you think that this is working for the Alberta government to blame the federal government for where it's trying to go when it's trying to manage its own energy needs?
I mean, they put out these ads, and I'm sure a lot of Torontonians and Ottawans and other people in Canada saw these, that no one wants to freeze in the dark. Well, it's well before the 2035 net zero timeline for Ottawa. And last Saturday, Alberta, 11 years before that, was almost freezing in the dark. They had these risk of rolling brownouts, this emergency alert on our phone to tell us all to shut down. And it was, it was a period where solar and wind at night on a cold night were not blowing, and that's not a surprise. Any electricity expert, even the officials there, would say this was expected. Natural gas was supposed to be carrying the freight here. In the 2035 net zero plan for Ottawa, they talk about peakers, these plants that you keep on, even if you're not using much natural gas for much of the time, you keep on as backstop, as emergency or when it's extreme. There'll be reasonable debates between parties on whether the allowances in the net zero plan are enough, but that's not the kind of the nuance we're going to hear a lot from the Alberta government leaders. They'll be talking about, we can't just rely on wind and solar fully, but the other reality is that this happened in 2024, not 2035. There are a lot of questions for Alberta as to why it was the only province or major jurisdiction in the West where this occurred, even though everybody was under this big deep freeze, and that has to do with a lot of issues with its own electricity system design, which, to their credit, they have been talking about figuring out.
No one has to know as much about Alberta's grid as Jason. That's why he's here. But you all know as much. You all know plenty about politics and the way Alberta's using this, and whether there is a vulnerability here, Althea, for the Liberals.
I was actually impressed that the Liberals didn't take the bait that I think that Daniel Smith and Scott Moe were kind of hanging out for them. They kind of took the high road on this one. This is an issue where I think, depending on your perspective, it colors the way you view this whole thing. And if you read like the letters to the editors and newspapers or columns across the country, different ideological publications, you will get a sense of that. So it is interesting the way people position themselves. I think people who do actually study this issue will tell you that you actually need an array, a buffet of energy options to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I did think it was interesting that Stephen Guilbeault's office, the federal environment minister's office, took great pains to note that in the clean regs, there is a note that you can actually use fossil burning energy sources that don't have carbon capture in periods of peak and in deep necessity. So hopefully we can look at this incident and not politicize it, but it is Canada, and obviously it will be. But it is interesting, and I think what Jason is talking about is really where the focus should be, which is why why is Alberta in this mess, and what will it do to get out of it?
But I did, Chantal, see Pierre Poilievre also on, must have been Friday, blaming the Prime Minister for the bad weather in Winnipeg at the time, Andrew, and also for the carbon tax, because then people can't heat their homes. Like, you can see how a political argument flows from this cold weather and the renewables and the rest of it. You can see where they're going there.
But maybe it's Andrew's fault that it was cold in Winnipeg. For all we know, I mean,
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
If one person can cause this cold weather, why not Andrew?
That's right.
Why pick on someone else if you can pick on him? Seriously, I'm not even going to go into the grid, the net zero.
No.
I'm just going to say what This Week Illustrated is that at this point, and with the current players in place in Ottawa and in Alberta and Saskatchewan, we are not on the verge of an adult conversation about where we go from here. There is something very childish about saying in 2024, see, this is what they want to do to us in 2035, without explaining how come it's happening to us now when we're not even doing this. So there is no profound analysis to be had about where this goes in the real world.
Andrew, given that you're to blame for everything, you can go last here.
Naturally, I accept full responsibility, but I blame my staff. Look, I'm just a simple country journalist, but I'm having a hard time understanding how a brownout, or whatever you want to call it, in 2024 can be blamed on clean electricity regulations that don't yet apply. It's a classic case of shifting the blame. The problems in the Alberta regulatory structure are the problems of the provincial governments doing or not doing, and it takes some chutzpah to blame it on the federal government. Now, does that mean the clean electricity regulations are well considered or well drafted or well thought out? No. There's a lot of reasons to think that they are overly prescriptive, overly intrusive, and may indeed in the future, when they apply fully, might indeed cut things too close to the bone in terms of not giving enough slack in the system to be able to take up these kinds of crises. So yeah, there's good reasons for the federal government to rethink it, not that they will. I mean, the point, I'll say this one more time, is carbon pricing is the necessary and sufficient condition for inducing people to make shifts away from fossil fuels and towards cleaner energy. It helps if the provincial government were not, quote unquote, pausing renewables, which is also makes it weird to be blaming renewables for this. So this is classic provincial politics in direction. Blame the feds for everything, every sparrow that falls.
30 seconds to you, Jason, to wrap it up on the politics of it.
It's going to be political forever. Danielle Smith. No, it is. I mean, Danielle Smith. It's actually funny that she happens to be on vacation this week, and it was her ministers, who maybe didn't amp it up to the same degree of 11 that she did. But she returns next week, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty about this. Because I think, while Andrew's right that it's not, this is not directly Ottawa's fault now, I think the messaging could well be that this is a premonition of the future. This is the situation now, as energy demand from electrification of vehicles and heat pumps and so much more increases, and there are restrictions on natural gas. Imagine how common the shock would be come 2035.
Well, at least we now know who to email about the bad weather. It's just directly to Andrew. It doesn't have to be anybody else. That's wonderful. Thank you all for that. I appreciate it. Now I'll send things back to Adrian in Toronto.
I'm just writing down that address, Rosie. Thank you. Next, a special in-flight announcement.
He's fought for his life and now is cancer-free.
One woman's surprise to mark a major milestone in our moment. Toronto's Hayley and Josh Louvel have been together for about 8 years now, but they have something else to celebrate. After months of treatments, Josh is finally cancer-free. So the good news meant that the couple could finally go on their delayed honeymoon to Jamaica. And on the Sunwing flight, Hayley slipped the cabin crew a note to make a special announcement. The in-flight surprise is our moment.
He's fought for his life and now is cancer-free and on his way to his honeymoon in Jamaica.
He was so surprised and definitely didn't know how to express his emotion until after I turned off the camera, but he loved it. This was our third time trying to go on our honeymoon due to his health complications. And I just thought, like, I need to do this for Josh because he just needs to be celebrated. I was so nervous to hand her the note. At first, she looked so confused, and I was like, just read it for me, please.
Special welcome to a guest on today's flight.
And 15 minutes later, she read the note and gave us a big hug, and she told us that she actually has some people in her life fighting cancer right now, and this gave her so much hope. He was diagnosed with stage 4 thymoma, cancer of the thymus gland. And he was intubated for 11 days in the ICU. After that, he still had to have 3 more chemo sessions. He then had surgery to remove his thymus gland, his entire right lung, the lining of his heart, and half of his diaphragm. Then after that, he still had to have 30 days of radiation. That was when he was considered cancer-free. It was the best moment ever. I've never met a stronger person than my husband. I couldn't be more proud of him.
Josh is doing great. You know, they're high school sweethearts. Haley's a nursing student at TMU and took some time off to care for Josh, and they have a huge future ahead. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.